Love, Scandal, and the Night That Changed Everything by Abram Lab. It is a strange thing, looking back on the life you once lived and realizing you were never truly in it. I was born Amish, raised with hard work and quiet faith. For 18 years, I followed the rules, never asking why I felt different, only that I must push it down, bury it deep, and never let it see the light of day. But then David and Lucas moved into the old Miller farmhouse, and everything I thought I knew about the world, about love, about myself, all of it began to unravel. The scandal of the two Englishmen. No one in our community had ever seen the likes of them before. They were too much, too loud, too free, and too shameless. Their clothes fit too closely, clinging where they should hung loose. They drank coffee at all hours, not just in the morning, as is proper. And when they spoke, they didn't lower their eyes with humility, but met a man's gaze, as if they were his equal. And worst of all, they loved each other. From the moment they arrived, the town was troubled by them. People would glance their way, then quickly look down, murmuring prayers under their breath. Sister Mary would press her lips into a thin line whenever she saw them pass by in that little red truck of theirs. Even Brother Eli, a man slow to anger, began clenching his fists whenever their names were mentioned. At first, there was only silence. The kind of silence that fills a room when an unspoken truth hangs heavy in the air. But one afternoon, outside the blacksmith shop, David kissed Lucas on the cheek. The silence that followed was deafening. Sister Mary's butter churn slipped from her grasp. Brother Eli whispered a prayer, though whether it was for mercy or for judgment, none could tell. Mothers pulled their children away, as if the ground beneath those two men had caught fire. And yet, while the rest of the town turned away, I stood there, unable to move, watching, wanting, wondering. My name is Isaac, and I was raised in the ways of the old order. From the time I was a boy, I knew my place. I would grow strong, work the land as my father had, take a wife, and raise a family. That was the way of things, the way it had always been. I had no reason to think life could be any different. No reason to question what I'd been taught, until the day those two Englishmen moved into the old Miller farm down the road. At first, I didn't pay them much mind. The English come and go, always doing things that seem strange to us. They build their houses too tall, paint their barns in colors that don't belong to the earth, and ride about in their noisy cars, never content to stay in one place. We watch them, but we do not trouble ourselves with their ways. But these two were different. The women in town whispered about them in hushed tones behind the market stalls. "Did you hear about the new Englishmen?" One would say. "They're not just friends, they're together." "Together?" Another would ask. "Like a man and his wife?" Ja, I saw them with my own eyes, walking hand in hand, kissing in the field, plain as day. At first, I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. A man was made for a woman. That was what we were taught. Anything else was sin. But something about the way those men lived so freely stirred something in me, a feeling I couldn't name. I should have turned away. I should have cast the thoughts from my mind. But instead, I found myself drawn to them, watching from a distance, trying to understand. One evening, when the fields were quiet and the sky burned with the last light of day, I walked the long road past the Miller farm, just to see, just to know. David and Lucas were standing in the yard, their hands nearly touching as they spoke. The moment felt suspended, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Then, Lucas reached up and cupped David's face in his hands. My heart pounded as their lips met in a kiss. It wasn't bold or brash. It wasn't a spectacle. It was tender. The kind of tenderness I'd only seen between a man and his wife. My mind raced. It was wrong. It had to be wrong. And yet, my heart fluttered with a feeling I couldn't explain. A feeling that made me question everything I'd ever known. I turned and walked away quickly, my chest tight. But even as I walked, the image of them stayed with me. The way they looked at each other, unafraid. I returned to the Miller farm again and again, always watching from the shadows. I wanted to understand how they lived, how they loved. And with each visit, my world grew more uncertain. The town continued to whisper, to pray, to look away, but I could not, for in those stolen moments, I began to wonder if the world was not as simple as I believed, if love could be something more than what I'd been taught. And as the sun dipped below the horizon once more, I stood in the fields, looking back at the Miller farm, feeling something shift within me. Perhaps it was time for everything to change. The night that changed everything. I do not know what moved me to go to their house that night. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps temptation, perhaps it was a slow-burning truth inside me, something I had long kept buried beneath duty, prayer, and the quiet life I had always known. But that night, it rose to the surface, unbidden, pulling me toward them. The evening was still, save for the distant hoot of an owl and the soft whisper of wind passing through corn stalks. My feet seemed to move of their own accord, drawing me across the fields, each step heavier than the last. My heart beat loudly, like a hammer striking the beams of a barn. I told myself I would knock on their door, ask them how they could live so openly, so unashamed. Ask them how it was possible to feel something so wrong, and still live without fear. But when I knocked, there was no answer. The temptation was too much. I should have turned away, should have walked back home, as any God-fearing man would. But I did not. I could not. Something stronger than what took hold of me, stronger than all the teachings I had been raised with. Without thinking, my hand found its way beneath my clothes. The touch was strange, unfamiliar, yet it sent a shudder through me that I could not deny. This was not something I had ever done before, not something I had been taught. In our world, such things were never spoken of, never acknowledged. A man's desires were meant for his wife, and even then, only in the quiet of night, in duty and restraint. Anything else was wrong, but in that moment, I could not stop myself. The sound of their love filled my ears, and my eyes could not look away. I watched them hold each other, without shame, without fear. The world around me faded, and in that brief moment, I felt something more than guilt. I felt alive. I felt something I had never known. A wave of heat washed over me, and my breath caught in my throat. I clung to the feeling, though it was fleeting, just a whisper in the night. But it was enough to change me forever. But as the moment passed, sharp, burning shame settled in my chest. My hands trembled as I gathered myself, as if I could undo what had just happened. I could still hear the wind rustling through the trees, the distant sound of horses' hooves on the road, but none of it felt real. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. Yet it could not erase what I had seen. The next evening, the sun began its descent behind the fields, and I found myself walking the road once more toward their house. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh earth and distant evening fires. My footsteps were light, as though I was only passing by, just a bit of curiosity. That was all. But with each step, my heart beat faster. My hands grew damp, though the evening air was crisp. I told myself there was no reason to be nervous, but I could not shake the feeling. Their house stood at the edge of the fields, dark against the twilight sky, a sturdy place, built with strong hands. But there was something about it that felt different, not like the way the English lived, with their bright lanterns burning late into the night, their ease of coming and going. No, this felt like something else, a pull I could not name. I stepped lightly, barely hearing my own footsteps on the dirt road. A lantern flickered inside, casting shadows on the wooden walls. The curtains were open and I could see inside, and that's when I saw them again. At first, it seemed nothing unusual. Two men sitting together, close in the way that friends sometimes are. But then, as I watched, hidden in the shadows, I saw the way one reached for the other. Their hands met, fingers lacing together like they had done it 1,000 times. I saw one lean in, resting his forehead against the other's, eyes closed, breathing him in. And then, before I could look away, he kissed him, not in the way a man greets his brother, not in the way I had ever seen. This was something else, something more. I should have turned away, should have walked home, shaken the thoughts from my mind, prayed for strength, but I could not move. I watched them, caught in a moment that held me fast, unable to look away. It was wrong, I had been taught. A man's love was for his wife, and even then it was to be quiet, modest, kept within the home. Anything else was sin. But as I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, I could not deny what I saw. It was not wickedness, not darkness, not shame. It was something else entirely. It was tender. It was gentle. It was love. And deep within me, buried under years of silence, of rules, of things left unspoken, something stirred. A feeling I had never given a name. A longing I had always pushed down, buried beneath the life that had been laid out before me. But here, under the quiet sky, in the hush of the evening, I could no longer ignore it. For the first time, I felt it, truly felt it, and I could not look away. The truth comes to light. I told myself I would never return, that I would repent, that I would erase that night from my memory and go on as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. 2 weeks passed, and yet I could not rid myself of it. The image of them burned behind my eyelids each night. The feeling of that moment, of my trembling hands, lingered within me like a brand upon my skin. I worked harder, prayed longer, but nothing could unmake what had been awakened inside me. And so I found myself standing on their porch again, heart pounding in my throat. My hands shook at my sides, the worn wood of the doorstep firm beneath my feet. This time, when I knocked, the door swung open. Lucas leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Well, our little Amish spy returns. I went still. My stomach dropped. My breath caught. David, behind him, grinned. You didn't think we didn't see you, did you? I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees locked. I had been caught. I should have run. Should have begged for forgiveness. Should have fallen to my knees and prayed for salvation. Instead, my voice, small and shaking, said, I think I'm like you. Lucas's smirk softened. David stepped forward, opening the door a little wider. Then David said, come inside. I hesitated, my breath shallow, my body frozen between fear and longing. The threshold before me felt like the edge of a cliff, yet my feet moved forward, drawn by something I could not name. I stepped inside. The house was warm, lit by the soft glow of oil lamps. It smelled of fresh bread, of pine wood, of something unmistakably safe. I had expected darkness and secrecy, shadows lurking in corners, whispers behind closed doors. Instead, I found a home, not unlike my own, yet entirely different in the way it made my chest ache with something I did not understand. David gestured to the table. Sit. Would you like some coffee? I nodded, though I did not trust my voice to speak. My hands clenched into fists on my lap, my body taut as a bowstring. Lucas sat across from me, studying me with quiet amusement, though there was something gentler in his eyes now. You are afraid, he said. Ja, I admitted, and yet you are here. I swallowed hard. I did not know what to do, what to think. All my life, I was taught that such things are evil, that they will lead a man to ruin. David placed a cup before me, the scent of strong coffee rising into the space between us. And now, what do you believe? I looked at them, at the warmth in their eyes, at the ease in their movements. They were not wicked. They were not tormented. They were simply whole, unashamed, alive. I wanted that, more than I had ever wanted anything. I do not know, I whispered, but I want to find out. Lucas reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. A simple touch, yet it sent a shiver through me, as if the final lock inside me had been undone. Then stay, he said softly. Stay and learn. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel lost. I did not feel wrong. I felt found. The man I am becoming. News spread quickly, as it always does in a small village like ours. When David and Lucas moved into the old Miller farmhouse, it was as though a storm had swept through, stirring up much talk. Folks could not stop speaking, not just about their love, but about their boldness, their disrespect for everything that had long been right in our world. I had seen them from a distance, and in the quiet of my thoughts, something began to stir within me. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know what it felt like to live free from the fear that has always held us back. It has now been a year since that night. I am still learning, still growing. At 19, my life feels far from complete. The world beyond the ways of our people is vast, and at times, It feels overwhelming, but no longer bound to the fields and customs that once defined me. I face each day with a new understanding of who I am. There is much I do not know, many challenges ahead, but also many new things I have found, and new faces who accept me for who I am. I have begun walking my own path, one step at a time. I have met others like me, and together we share stories, laughter, and understanding. I am learning what it means to live without fear, to love without shame, but I am still finding my place in this new life. The future I long for is still coming together. There have been moments of doubt, times when I wonder if I have made the right choice. Sometimes I think of the old ways and wonder if I should return. But deep in my heart, I know I am where I am meant to be. I have begun to seek a future that I once thought was beyond my reach. Though I do not yet know all that awaits me, I know it is mine to claim. My name is Abram, and my story is still unfolding.
Thank you for watching the latest episode of Petals Pride. We hope Abram's inspiring coming out story, based on his real-life journey, touched your heart. If you enjoyed this episode, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Keep blooming, and always take pride in who you are.